Mark?
They did a fine job.
Nathan and Mark already gonna see eye to eye. Previous years, it's gonna be fun this year. I'll just say that. Half hour showing.
Because people are in the street, they love to talk, make sure the house is through. Kate's making it for Tuesday morning.
All right, I have 6 o'clock, we're gonna call this meeting to order. Jessica, roll call.
Flint.
Here.
Mullen.
Here.
Williamson.
Here.
Hampton.
Here.
Husinga. Here. Maher.
Here.
Overberg.
Here.
Any changes to the agenda?
No changes to the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
I'll second. Roll call.
Flint.
Yes.
Mullen.
Yes.
Williamson.
Yes.
Hampton.
Yes.
Husinga. Yes. Maher.
Yes.
Overberg.
Yes.
All right, we have one new business item, and it's to the consideration to accept the bid for the PEO Memorial Building demolition.
Okay, so in your packet, there are several related items. The first is a bid tabulation sheet from this afternoon. The bids were opened at 2 o'clock at central office. We had 3 bids come in. The estimated budget, as per the architect, was $371,000. The low bid was from Carlo Corporation, $238,125 was the low bid. Everything, the bid security, everything was appropriate. I also included the bid form from DeCarlo. It's got the bid on it, $238,125, and I also included the bid on it as well. So the bid, it's just the bid form. So. You have questions on the bids?
Where is the Carlo out of?
They're from West Des Moines. They had a representative at the pre-bid meeting, and then he did the walkthrough as well. We went, after the pre-bid meeting at central office, they did the walkthrough as well. So he's seen seen the site.
When it's such a wide range here, in reflecting the bids, there's no reason to believe that he's leaving anything out. Is that-
I don't think so. Do you want to comment on that,
Yeah,
Chad?
no, he was there, he talked like, he was very interested in this project, so, he was gonna get the parts in like, the week or so.
Any other questions?
I'll add one thing, I think he does have a capability of doing some things that, say the high bidder was not able to do. He does have a crusher, he's got maybe some more equipment that maybe what the other company does. So when you see that, that almost 200, that difference there is probably not.
This is what they do, and he just has the equipment, it's not bringing somebody else has to do it for him. I assume we're discussing this.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah, move on.
Okay, so we'll move on from the bids, not from them, we're on that agenda item. I did send to you the proposal from Save CR Heritage. So you've had a chance to look at that.
Yes, we appreciate your taking the time to come down and tour and write the proposal. If we were to proceed on that, I think we have a lot of questions of needing more detail on numbers, costs, what nominal amount we're planning to offer, those types of things. We want a more complete contract that we're going to consider. Personally, I feel like we kind of need to know who our neighbors are going to be out there for if and when we develop the rest of the campus for any educational purposes. And right now, we don't know what that will be. We kind of want that flexibility to own the land and to know who the neighbors are when I have students out there.
I agree with you, Melinda, that right now we want to, and I would like to keep ownership until a master plan is completely formulated. I guess I'm not really interested in selling that portion right now.
Right, I think we would have a lot of things to consider if some type of different business were going to occupy that space. You know, we have Wisdom Quest students there right now. We have students using the gymnasium after school almost daily. And, you know, what is the responsible thing to do in our position? So my hope was that this building could stay, you know, until we had some master planning. Josh, like you said, the situations that have come up though is the brick falling off the building, the liability to the school district, you know, 24 hours a day. You know, we can have anybody step foot on that, especially when the students are around there and have the brick falling off the building. So why now we had the sewer backup? You know, the sewer backed up over the summer, and John has that coming up too. So what is the, you know, responsible thing to do?
So I just put a couple of things together here. I wanted you guys to see this, just to give some perspective about where that building is. I mean, you're talking maybe 25 feet between the activity center and the building itself. So I would strongly recommend against turning over the building or the ground. I would just would not recommend that. I kind of likened it a little bit to the comparable to the city and to the metal building we currently own. You know, you mentioned neighbors, but having that, and this building is much closer than the metal building is, you know, to the city offices. So I'm just stating that as a comparison, that you know, they didn't want someone else in that building with the opportunity to own it. So just the proximity alone is worthy of consideration. I would say in terms of another occupant, if it was some kind of a business, there is no parking whatsoever that is available. So that's a consideration as well. Our architect was also sharing that our level of abatement for asbestos is a level that it's less intrusive because we would be doing a whole building demolition. If you were going to do anything inside that building and remodel inside that building, you would have to abate at a much more extensive level because there's lead-based paint on the walls, there's lead in the window casings, the caulking around the windows, and so you're looking at a much more significant level of abatement than you have to do with a whole building demolition.
So when you bought the Westland, you didn't want the PO building, right? I know it come with it, you had no say, but.
We couldn't identify a use for it.
Okay. So had they not, if you would have never bought it, you never had no say, you would have bought it or moved in. So my other question is, has it ever been put up to a public offering to see if a developer wants to buy it? Now we have to say that we can move into it if we're able to sell it. And with the ad hoc committee going now, we don't know if the elementary schools will go there. I mean, I know I sound wishy-washy from 2 weeks ago, but I had time to think about it. What would it take to put it on hold for 6 weeks and then put it up for a public offering? And see what the ad hoc committee comes up with.
I would just go back to what I said earlier, that we own the entire block right now, and I guess I would not be willing to section off that corner when we don't have a plan yet. And even maybe when we do have a plan, I don't know if I'd be willing to section off that corner to a neighbor, to someone else.
I would agree with Josh, because we would have no control over who would be next door while we had students on the campus 25 feet away. I would prefer to continue to own the entire central campus, so that doesn't limit what our future options might be for development there.
We did have some initial conversations, if there were some people early on that showed some interest in, and we did have some initial conversations about what kind of business could actually go there, and I think we struggled with, you know, what kind of business would that make sense for, because it's a unique building, and then that was kind of the end of that conversation.
I know that the building is very close to the building that we will be keeping. I understand these concerns. And I share them. I won't deny that. However, across the street, we don't have any say over who bought, the other buildings that were part of our Westland. And we're just having to accept, is city zoning, that prevents, you know, something wild from going there that, you know, we could take solace in knowing. But, you know, to our chagrin, we didn't put, you know, a public request for proposals out there. You know, to your point, Mark, we never really did publicly try to open up a bidding process for options like this. Having done so would have afforded us the ability to set, you know, requirements, and make it a chance for a very serious inquiry-only type situation, kind of like we set for this, the bid for the demolition of it. I know that I've said before that we've owned it for this time, we were hoping somebody would just come along, but to a lot of people's point, we did not provide a very public option or opportunity to bring a project to come and save it. So that aside, like Melinda, I have a ton of questions about this proposal. I don't know if I'm able to ask the person directly or if I have to talk rhetorically. Am I able to disclose certain items within this proposal in my questioning, just to share? I feel like we need to share some light on why we're questioning the proposal. Like for me, just in general, the funding seems unlikely. You know, there isn't a concrete evidence showing us that this person has the funding secured that it would take to undertake this project. You know, so then in that mindset, I can't help but think if the person fails to come up with enough funding to really renovate it to turn it into something that's useful, then I assume the person doesn't have enough money to demo it. So then, you know, we have all these questions. I think that we can all agree. And while this is a proposal for something that could use that building, it didn't, to me, answer the main questions that need to be answered to really take this into serious consideration. You know, the type of business that will be going in that's listed in this proposal, to me, doesn't seem like something that would create enough revenue to fund this kind of project for renovation. So, without being shown that, you know, there's enough capital involved, set aside, you know, a down payment to, not to us, but to what it would take to renovate this building, I don't see it as a viable option. So while we must consider all options, the options before us need to be viable and fit the needs of the district, fit the needs of that building. I know a lot of people are really tied to it, passionately, emotionally, but I don't think those people want to see it falter even more if it isn't, you know, seen through properly. So we have to do what's right fiscally by the district. We have to look long-term for the future of all of our students, whether we move more academic programming to that facility or that campus. And I know I'm just rambling, but those were just my thoughts that I had on this proposal.
I share the same thoughts, Aaron. Good job for rambling, going through it. I share the same.
Well, my concern over this proposal was, and I don't know how this would go over to the taxpayers of Mount Pleasant County School Building, or school district, is in the proposal, since we're saving money on demolition, we're gonna be asked to roof the building as a potential possibility. And I question how that would go over in the school district, being asked while you're not demoing it, but you're gonna put a roof on it for someone else who's gonna own it. And in a business that's in our section, I don't think any of us would probably sell a section off of our land or want something, and are not concerned about who comes in as our neighbor. And we don't have any control of that right now. Well, we have control of it right now, but we wouldn't have necessarily maybe later on. And who says that if they're in there for 6 months, then they decide, this isn't going to work, it's yours, or it's somebody else's. So those are some concerns of mine. The PO building has served its purpose. It's been there for a long time. It was part of Iowa Weston. Iowa Weston is not in existence anymore. And I understand the emotion that people have. I even had an office in that building for 5 years. Hated climbing those stairs every morning. But it's time, I think, we need to look at what we can do for the best of our students, our faculty, and our staff, and our community school district.
So I don't know, maybe going back a little bit about what you said, Mark. I mean, anytime that you purchase property, there can be liabilities involved. You know, look at buying a house, you know, you have a building inspection done. We had a facilities assessment done and everything. We knew what we were gonna have to do for the students to occupy a gym, a new gym would cost $20 million. We've been checking those off the list with our construction dollars. The auditorium, the same thing. $20 million for a new auditorium. I don't see that happening. This property allows us to do that. The issue is this PEO Memorial Library building, as far as a safety hazard. Currently, we have went out for bids, and we have a very low, respectable bid, along with the asbestos abatement, is way below what our estimates were. Right now, with these bids, we have the opportunity to extend them. Going on what you're saying, Aaron, I believe we have, I don't know how long of a time frame, but we could extend. Is it 2 weeks, John? Is there any language for extending?
Well, it looks like in the bid documents, I did talk to the architect about this, because I wanted to be ready for any contingency that came up, but it looks like 45 days is the hold on the bid price.
So with the proposal that we have, my main concerns are making the building weather tight. You know, how are they able to address windows, roof, brickwork, the sewer repair? So anybody that would have a proposal would need to address a lot of issues with what that funding is. And if we need to wait 2 weeks, that would be the November regular board meeting, or if it's 45 days. You know, is that something that we could table these bids for? That's a question to anybody here.
Yeah, I think it's something to consider. I don't know what we're really looking at going through this discussion.
So our three options are to accept, deny, or delay.
Yeah, you can do those three things. You can accept, deny, or delay. Could I, I'd like to comment when we get a chance.
So if we delay it, what's our course of action? Or we put it up for public offering, or we just delay it and delay? I mean, what's our plan? If we delay it, what are we gonna do?
Assuming you're trying to do a request for a proposal for a developer, you're delaying, right?
That's what I'm asking.
And you need a developer proposal in within 45 days.
yeah, there isn't,
Not even, I didn't say 30 days, to give us time to discuss whatever that proposal would be. Right?
at a cost as well, at an additional cost.
But if most of us are sitting here thinking, we don't want to just let anybody go into that building. I think I'm reading people's minds. We're concerned about who could go into that building and who might go in that building. Does it make sense just to kick the can down the road for another 2 weeks or 45 days?
I guess that's my question, Mike, is why? Why? Is it because of emotions attached to the building? Because of the nature of the building? Because of what the building has? I don't understand. What I'm trying to understand is why and how this remotely fits the mission of the school district to empower students to achieve without limits. How this in any way fits the mission.
And I think, John, you've been over backwards helping PEO organization internationally, state, local, and trying to get them interested. There's no interest. I mean, they're getting some items out of the building and so forth. And I want you to know, I really appreciate what you've done in that aspect, in helping, because I think some people have thought, well, you didn't have PEO involved in it from the groundwork. Well, we have.
That, right, I'm a PEO as well. I have attachment to Wesleyan and Central Campus, and that PEO was established there, but it wasn't established in that building. And you have been over backwards, and Chad and staff, allowing PEO International has been in there, as well as our local chapters. They were able to take items that they do want to keep for historical purposes to the plaques that go to Des Moines, to the international headquarters, as well as the cornerstone, of course, time capsule, and the local chapters have things, and they'll take them over to Old Main, so that they can stay preserved for the history of PEO. And I feel bad that the PEO International isn't even interested in their own building or their own campus in Mount Pleasant. Not like we are, we're attached to it now, but we appreciate everything you've done to work with them.
My pleasure. The cornerstone, and just so the extraction of the cornerstone is part of the proposal, or it's part of the demo, yes. And that's additional cost to preserve that cornerstone and the contents of that cornerstone. Additional cost that the district is paid.
I think one way you could look at it is how it would be serving the district to postpone it a couple weeks. Could be if we got a proposal that we, A, sell it, and we're not spending $240,000 on demolition, or B, give it away, we're still not spending $240,000, where that $240,000 could be spent somewhere else. Now, I'm gonna go back to, if we do that, we're selling a corner of a piece of ground that I'm, at this point, not willing to sell. So, for $240,000, is it worth it to me to keep it without a proposal?
Can I just ask some follow-up on that? Because I'd like to know why. Because for the sole fact of the preservation of the building?
Why?
Why would we ask for a proposal for development or sale or whatever it might be? Why would we ask for that?
It would be
solely for the purpose for preservation of the building?
No, solely for the purpose of not spending $240,000.
Okay.
That's what I'm.
Okay.
And not only not spending it, possibly selling it and making some funds back on what we purchased. That, you have a range there. We could give it to somebody, we could sell it to somebody.
But many of us have said, we're concerned who would take over that building. So are we gonna sell it? Probably not.
So, yeah, it would require a very refined RFP. And we would need to determine what, if any, entity we were okay sharing that amount of space with future and current educational programming. Just spitballing, because it was talked about at one time, so museum. Turning that into the Belgrade Mansfield Museum for women's history and law. Is that something the school district would consider having access to empower and help students achieve without limits? So it would need to get very specific. We would need to take the time to determine what we're okay with going in there. And then, as to your point earlier, with the ad hoc committee talking about master's facilities, we would probably need their input. So this does increase the timeline that we're talking about. So why did this, suddenly get reinvigorated? It comes down to the emotion and the passion. I know that a lot of people in this community want to see it saved. And while we might be able to be criticized to say, well, we didn't provide an opportunity with a legitimate RFP, we still had no one come forward in the amount of time that we owned it with a decent proposal that makes sense, that fits our mission. So in the end, if this gets decided to be demoed, we're going to have a lot of people upset, but it's the same people that were upset, and I share that emotion that lamented the closing of Westland. So again, Mount Pleasant School District is not in the building preservation. That's not part of our mission. We need to be financially responsible for taxpayer money. We need to provide a safe and effective learning environment for all of our students and students to come. And just to reiterate that safety, we are now looking at a building that is causing safety concerns. So I think, after having spoken up for it, and giving it a lot of thought, talking to a lot of people to get into why they're passionate about this at this time, we just do not see a viable proposal for something to go in there and make it safe and up to date that would share our mission to empower students without limits. But I think moving forward in the future, we have the opportunity, this was a learning experience, but we have the opportunity to save a couple other historical buildings. And I know it's not on the agenda, and I'm not saying that anything is being talked about with that at this time, but I'm hoping that we can, when the time comes, develop a request for proposal to start the ball rolling, provide enough time for legitimate and viable opportunities to come to us through a configured time frame and style to potentially save some of the other two buildings. So I think without a viable proposal in front of us, I don't know what kicking the can down the road would do for us. I think that if there was an entity that had the proven capability to financially pull this off, that it would have presented itself already.
Any other discussion?
We set a couple of documents as well that were still, that were related. This was the sewer backup, back in the July 31st, happened in July. We so we don't have, we have liability insurance on the building. That's the only coverage that we have. So that would have cost $19,000, almost $20,000. We were discounted because of the no coverage. So we did end up paying $8,000 for the recovery, the cleanup. So you guys have this as well. These are central campus utilities for the last year. I did this in landscape, so I'll try and so people can see it. So Chapel, Old Main, Student Union, and then PEO is the fourth line, and then the Student Union, the HOW. The reason some of these, so the PEO Memorial Building is just electric because it is a geothermal system, so the electricity cost is for the circulation of the water and pumps. Student Union does use some gas and electric, as does the Chapel. Old Main is geothermal as well. So anyway, fourth line down is the PEO. So this is through September through September. And you can see the total utility costs there for each one of those buildings. This is PEO right here.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I entertain a motion.
I will move to approve DeCarlo for demolition of the PPO building.
Is there a second?
I would second.
Any other discussion? Jessica, roll call?
Lynn,
Yes.
Mullen,
Yes.
Williamson,
Yes.
Hampton,
Yes.
Husinga,
Yes.
Maher,
Yes.
Overberg.
Yes.
That concludes our new business. Our next item is our works. We'll move into the work session in which we have Mr. Shipley, our Iowa House District 87 representative.
Okay, Jeff, Representative Shipley, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. And I will tell the board members as well, I did reach out to all of our representatives. Several of them had prior commitments. I just want to say, Jeff, you're always available, and I appreciate that a lot, whether it's here in Mount Pleasant or whether it's up on Capitol, at the Capitol. I appreciate your accessibility to talk about different things. So maybe you want to here's what I told the board, Jeff, is what things do you want to share and make sure that Representative Shipley knows as we start to head and get closer to the opening session, or excuse me, the session in January. So I just, they may have questions for you. I have a few questions, but maybe you want to, open up with some comments that you have.
Sure. Well, thank you, John, to the board and to the public for the invitation to be here. To your comments, so I do serve on the education committee. This is my second time holding that charge, so I do have a higher expectation for accessibility. So very happy to be here. And yeah, I think most of all, I do want to listen to what's top of mind, from your perspective, and just follow up on all the conversations we've been kind of having going on. So I'll just start with a couple top line things, and we're going to go up, open it up as wide as possible, as much time as we need. Just off the top here, Looks like your enrollment ticked up a little bit, this last, enrollment period, and, you guys are still spending pretty well with plenty of buffer underneath your authorized budget, so thank you, for exercising that fiscal responsibility with the powers from the state. It's very important to exercise that.
Just to interject there, Jeff, we did this current year that we are in, fiscal year 26, so last fiscal year, we did have a minimal increase of enrollment, about 20 students or so. We just finished certifying enrollment for this year, for the finances for fiscal year 27. So our enrollment was down just over 50 students.
Okay.
So on our certified enrollment.
So back down to 1663 or there.
Yeah, served enrollment is going to be somewhere right around 1,700 students. With the number of students that we serve is going to be right around 1,700 students.
Well, thank you for correcting me. Obviously, everyone knows.
And sorry to jump in, but as far as our fiscal, viability and going forward, we did the board knowingly when the COVID dollars finished in fiscal year 24, and we had added some personnel to meet some needs that we had. So we knew going into fiscal year 25, by keeping those personnel on, keeping those positions on, I'll say, we knew that was going to have an effect on our unspent authorized budget. We did go ahead and keep them on because we felt like, our unspent authorized was about $6.9 million. So we did have a reduction. We just closed our books on fiscal year 25. We did have a reduction from $6.9 million to about $6.1 million in unspent authorized budget. So couple that with a reduction of just over 50 students. So we're going to, we will have to make some adjustments financially.
Thank you for the more detailed look there. I just kind of glanced at the Department of Management website to pull those figures, but so as we all know, we have a shifting education landscape. There's been a lot of changes, lots of discussion. We're trying to make sure the institutions evolve for the 21st century. Obviously, you guys at the district level are making sure you guys can maintain, robust day-to-day operations to serve your students and your families. At the state level, we operate on a 2-year election cycle and try to, really look at a comprehensive systems like view and compare our state to other states and look at education, as we compare nationally and internationally. So just a little bit different focus for what you guys are doing, but obviously we need great working relationships. So again, thank you for the opportunity to visit. I think the biggest things that the state's probably working on, the comprehensive state literacy. So this came out in 2024. And my understanding, the way this works is the Department of Education helps equip your curriculum director or your teachers. I think there's some professional development involved. And basically just kind of set up a more stringent framework for teaching literacy in the state. We just recently reported some success on that the Department of Education reported that our literacy is back to where it was pre-COVID, and we've been able to bounce back quicker than other jurisdictions in the United States. And then this year we did the comprehensive state mathematics plans. We're trying to do the same thing with math. And so that's a key point where I'm going to have feedback on how is everything working out at the Department of Education. Are you feeling that you're getting the support you need in these areas? And then again, the data measuring to make sure these programs are getting where we want them to go. Just on the literacy piece, so in education is being known as the Mississippi Miracle, where they bounced back from dead last in the country to now top 10. And it really was over, policy differences in how they were approaching literacy as a state. So Governor Reynolds a few years ago tried to mimic that. And so again, just keeping that broader perspective on just the overall education landscape. So in literacy, math, and also we're revisiting the social studies curriculum and rewriting the standards. So again, the process is, I believe it's a volunteer kind of thing. You ask the Department of Education to put yourself on this, and you sit around with the state board, you come up with some curriculum standards based on the guidelines the legislature put forth. And I think the goal would be to have something new by school year starting in 26. As I think everyone aware, the social sciences, it does kind of dive into controversy from time to time, because that's been some of the issue. So, yeah, not to get too far off track, I was able to visit the IJAG class here at the high school a couple weeks ago. I think that's a great program, really enjoyed spending time with those students. At one point, I reached out to the food service director, but I canceled that meeting because the menu was posted online, so I had all the information I needed and didn't want to waste time. Looks like the football program's been very successful, big victory this last Friday night, so congratulations there. Give the fans what they want to see. And then just again, thanks to the work of the ad hoc committee that you guys have been doing to just make sure the public is involved on your facilities and again, having the robust discussion. So just thank you for the board members who are, again, just making sure the public is satisfied with the direction of the district and that all voices are heard. So I think the other thing that I'll just mention, well, again, I want to open this up, but I guess two things real quick, because I know, well, I'll start with this. So the feedback we've gotten on the cell phone restriction has been, I think, universally positive. And we just basically, I think we talked a little bit about this, last year and how it worked at the state level is, we get these case studies from districts. So it was Ottumwa, Ankeny, Des Moines, and they just told really great stories and they saw a lot of results and gave a really convincing case. And so the governor took it and ran with it. And a lot of states have been doing that. And so it did kind of pop the bubble on a much larger discussion with technology in the classroom. So what we've been hearing is some parents wanting to go a step further. They're really happy with restricting the cell phones, and they want to know what else can be done on the one-to-one device policies if they want an educational environment that does not have a Chromebook or does not have an iPad offered to them, and maybe is a strict pencil paper type environment, maybe no Wi-Fi. I don't know exactly what it looks like. We're collecting this feedback, but at least on the House side, I think this is a discussion that's advancing. That is, when we look at what students and families want and the pedagogy associated with what's actually going on in the classroom, how is instruction being conducted. There's a lot of red flags. I'd say it's just controversial, but there have a lot of red flags coming up around the technology. Obviously, from the Jonathan Haidt perspective, which I think a lot of people are familiar with, the anxious generation and the mental behavioral health side of things with this new technology, but also the question of, is it really leading to proficiency? So a couple decades ago, you would have said, hey, give these kids a computer, they'll learn twice as much with half the effort, and that sales pitch hasn't really seemed to borne out at this point in time. So we're keen on looking at, again, that role of technology, not just on the side effects of health and those concerns, but also, is it really leading to proficiency and greater skills? So that's a conversation to kind of get ready for. And then, just again on the behavioral health violence in the classroom. So this is, again, a reoccurring perennial issue. We've had people reaching out, and there's really not a lot of easy answers. We passed House File 604 2 years ago, and basically, allows an ombudsman to receive complaints if teachers feel they're not being supported in the classroom. There is required reporting of classroom violence that the State Department of Ed should be collecting figures on this per district. But from the anecdotal feedback we've been hearing, probably there's a lot more work to do in this area. There was recently a news article in the Corridor Business Journal about a teacher in Iowa City that got a lot of attention and a lot of public feedback. So that's still very much top of mind for a lot of educators. I did the teacher appreciation event over in Fairfield last month, and again, that's a pretty, again, top of mind theme. Probably equivalent to making sure we don't mess up IPers or anything like that. And I think just on that note, I guess what I would ask of the board, considering that these behavioral health challenges are going to be top of mind, I don't know what opportunities there could be for more working group, task group type of things, where we get educators around the table and make sure they're directly plugged in with lawmakers and administrators and the AEA, whoever else needs to be there. House File 604 came about because we did have a big committee room full of teachers who went around for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, describing what they were seeing in the classroom. So I think we just want to make sure that process is ongoing and as wide a scope as possible. And we have, like Representative Hora in Washington's on the Education Committee as well, and maybe we do something regionally, or maybe I can, again, I would love to have that feedback on what can we do to improve behavioral health outcomes in the classroom, and make sure that no teacher is feeling burdened by the threat of violence or something like that, because that's just not very good for the education system or anyone else. So those are just some of my notes that I scribbled together before coming here. Obviously, I'm much more interested in hearing what's on your mind and how I can be a good representative for you guys.
Thank you, Jeff. Dr. Butler, would you mind, Jeff started out with the literacy and the math. Can you just comment on how that has been playing out here in our schools?
Absolutely. So we've got teachers working right now on getting their personalized reading plan set up and in the panorama. And then this winter, once we have students identified as persistently at risk, we'll do the same for math. So we're getting everybody trained and set up and ready to roll on the lens.
There's a parental notification piece on that too?
Absolutely, yep. Parental notification has gone out for the reading and what for the math as well. We did send out an initial math notification, letting parents know that the screening is happening for the math, and they'll be doing the same sort of program that we did for the reading will happen for the math as well.
There is a professional development part of it too. Has that been satisfactory from your perspective?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of people that are taking advantage of some of the AEA offered professional development, and I know there's supposed to be more coming from the DE as well. Haven't heard too much about that.
Is that like required for everyone, or is it?
No, it's required for schools that are not targeted but comprehensive or not comprehensive. So it's not required for us, it is optional.
Okay, okay, thanks for filling in the gaps. I'm
Yeah.
kind of curious how that works, so.
Yeah.
Representative Shepherd, thank you for coming tonight and giving us the time. In the notes that you went over before, one of my concerns is you didn't mention anything about state aid. And to me, state aid is very important for our kids. And you didn't even address it. In fact, very little with pertaining to expenses to education did you allude to. What is the path looking like? Because the economy and everything in the state of Iowa is not looking too good. And that bothers me because your representation has been not to support education when it comes to a percentage increase. And not 2%, not 2.5, but greater than that, and it takes more money. Our demographics has changed. We've lost 50, 60 kids. Most of the areas in Southeast Iowa, some of the areas that you represent, have lost kids. They're gonna lose thousands of dollars. That's gonna come down to programs, instruction, and other aspects that school districts may have to reduce. What is a feeling by the legislature, your political party, pertaining to state aid and how we can improve that? That's one aspect of it. The second one is vouchers. It's unlimited what they can do with the money that schools get from the state, whereas we have to dot every T, dot every I, cross every T, and so forth, in money that we spend. And the voucher system doesn't do that. They don't have to take all the students as we have to take. So those are a couple things. I was concerned when I kept waiting for you to mention it, and I was concerned. Is this not a priority? It ought to be a priority for the families in the state of Iowa, and you being on the education committee, that you push for this. Will you stand up to your party and say, the percentage is not enough, we need to do more for schools in the state of Iowa?
So, thanks, Mike, for the question. I appreciate you getting right to it. Obviously, again, the financial picture is very important, and you came to the Capitol, right, so you were there in those meetings, and you were able to kind of get a sense on how kind of awkward and painful all these discussions are. So, you know, the big difference was between the House and the Senate, and, you know, the House was pushing for a higher percentage, the Senate was locking at 2% for whatever reason. I think your concerns versus the inflation rate are totally valid. That's going to be something everyone's facing, and I'll say that, yeah, as far as, you know, the Trump administration not meeting inflation targets, I think there's a proper criticism there as well, that I think this is a problem that's going to be very persistent. Also, I've criticized the state that, yeah, if we grow our budget 5%, only give 3% or so to the schools, that's probably not the cleanest way to do it. And so, you know, I think there's, yeah, I mean, more money would be helpful. I can see why, you know, people are asking for that. The other kind of piece I also did mention, we've been trying to direct more money directly to paraeducators and teacher salary. So finally now the teacher salary piece of $50,000 starting is implemented. So I believe that appropriation was made separate to state aid. We're gonna have to continue our appropriation for the paraeducators. That's another thing the House has fought for versus the Senate. So there's plenty of ways to shore up resources and, you know, not even to mention, well, I won't open the can of potatoes on school security and resource officer issue too, but I would love to give more funding into there. We talked about that. I know that's important to superintendent. So yeah, I think we have a lot of valid criticism. How all this plays out, you know, that's a political process. And you know, like I said, I'm happy to stay on the House caucus and try to push the number a little bit higher. But I think again, we have to set policy, and I think we have to have really, really solid policy, and once that's established, then it's gonna make the funding go a lot easier. So the challenges you're still gonna have politically across the state is there have been numerous scandals. And I guess, again, I don't wanna focus on this stuff because it's irrelevant to your district, but just so you're aware of the environment as it affects the State House. So the big thing, last news was the largest school district in Iowa had a superintendent, and there's a lot we could go into that, and it's a very unfortunate situation, and they had to turn over their other administrator too, and we haven't gotten an explanation. So, interestingly enough, thankfully the performance of that district is improving, so the state doesn't really have any basis to get too overly involved, but it's a very upsetting situation for a lot of people. And then also there's been, again, I hate to bring this up, but just so you're aware, Oskaloosa, a couple other districts, they've been embroiled in controversy because of comments that their educators made on social media, that may or may not have reflected positively on the district and public education as a whole. And so, you know, school boards had to relieve employees, and the employees turned around and sued them, claiming they have a First Amendment right to say things. And I think Auditor Rob Sand described it very well, that, you know, when teachers are saying things publicly, you have to really ask yourselves, you know, how that would affect someone wanting to send their kid to that environment. So, and again, I'm not here to put anyone down, but just from a state perspective, we see the teachers union react in a very interesting way to some of these controversies where they're supporting the teacher who said something on social media they shouldn't have, that I would have certainly lost my job if I said something similar. So, those issues we kind of have to iron out. I think the more we iron those things out, I think the more hopefully funding will be available, or more eagerness there'll be. And again, I don't really know, I didn't talk to the Senate about that, but I know some members did, and you were there. So it's, like I said, it's a painful, unpleasant conversation. I'm happy to support the higher figure of the House number. I think even with the ESA program, I think that's still kind of evolving, a work in progress. And I think, well, I just think that the landscape is this way, whether we want it or not. That public schools, they don't exist on an island, they're not isolated, and I think more and more we're gonna be relying on public-private partnerships, whether that's local businesses and local industries supplying career and technical education rather than being supplied by the school district. I think there's a lot of other opportunities we can do to build greater private-public partnerships, whether it's where charter schools, private schools, whatever it is, homeschool demand. So I heard from board member in Fairfield, they're not losing students so much to the other private schools as they are to just homeschooling options that are now available online that might not have been as available 5 or 10 years ago. So it's the landscape is shifting. We haven't even talked about AI yet, which is another fun conversation. But so I hear your concerns loud and clear, and like I said, I want to make sure the district has the resources they need to fulfill its mission. So, sorry, I think that's answering.
No, I'll just piggyback on Mike's. I served 12 years on the Carlisle School Board, and back then, it was a 4% state allowed growth. Not every year, we were able to put 2% into salaries and benefits for teachers, paras, our substitutes, and then the other 2% we could put in curriculum, programming, education. And so, I'd love to see that go back to those days. And the 4% probably seems kind of high, but we can't make it on the 2%. And yes, he's right, I was reading a survey that nationwide, they were asking parents about this school choice and the voucher program. 56% of all parents in the country said if the voucher system were available to them, they would take advantage of it. That's very detrimental to our public school system. And I'm wondering too, the private schools, they don't seem to be under the same scrutiny or have to go through the same requirements and reporting and testing that we do. Hiram, why don't they have the same system and have to report back?
So a lot of great questions there, and I believe there was, so previously there was not an accredited private school here in the county. I believe there is now. And for every student that enrolls in there, I think it does kick back at least a couple of the categorical fundings in the district. So the idea was hopefully, you know, if you splinter off, you know, that there was enough money for the per pupil funding that you could hopefully make it as much of a win-win for everyone. I mean, there's a lot of differences between the private and the publics. One, you know, you guys have taxing authority, right? You know, you could, if someone doesn't pay their tax bill to you, you can force them out of their house and take their property from them if they don't pay their property taxes. So that's a tremendous power that's entrusted to school districts that the private schools don't have. You know, they do have a lot of expectations to accommodate students, but the main issue is the students with disabilities that they may not be able to. And you guys have been charged with federal law, that you can't turn anyone, you can't turn away at someone with a disability, and you have to accommodate them, even if it costs $100,000 a year, you're still legally accountable for, you know, on the hook for that. So it is a much different legal landscape. When the ESA program came into being, it really was to release pressure from a lot of the larger school districts in the Des Moines metropolitan area that, you know, parents were very, very frustrated during the COVID pandemic, and this was the policy solution that was available. I don't know the long-term forecast, if it's around to stay or what the future holds for the program, but it seems to be feeling a need that if people want it, if there's a room to take advantage of it. So, I'm trying to remember the last part of your question. I should have wrote it down.
I just wonder if there were, do private schools have to follow the same rules as public in reporting back?
So, I mean, right now, no, and I think the program was designed to keep it as hands-off as possible, and I think that is an interesting criticism. The other way you could spin that is, okay, maybe we're overbearing on what we're expecting of the public schools, and, you know, maybe these bureaucracies we set up, or even, and again, talk about the accommodations of students with special needs. A persistent thing we've been hearing is this least restrictive environment standard. I don't take it personal. But this least restrictive environment standard, which I believe originated again in that Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, you know, 50 years ago. And I think over the years what we've seen is, again, just kind of estimating a figure that the students who are needing accommodations has gone up probably by a factor of 2. I would guess we have at least twice as many students, you know, with disabilities and needing special accommodations than they did in 1975. So why is that? And those are very important questions that they, you know, Federal Department of Health and Human Services have been trying to investigate on, you know, what is leading to some of these behavioral health outcomes or what's really going on. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and I think that's, again, I don't want to cast it as a burden, but that's a huge responsibility that's placed on the public school districts to support the students with disabilities. And so I don't know if I have any easy answers to this necessarily. Again, I think we're just trying to allow the system to evolve in a way that just meets the needs of everyone to the greatest extent we can, because there is a lot of need out there. And I think that's just a larger trend, is the school district has expanded in scope quite a bit from, you know, it's not just educating the child, but you're caring for their social and emotional health and all the sexual reproductive education. I mean, you could go through the list of just how things have eaten away at the school day year after year after year. There's always another expectation to feeding children and clothing them in certain circumstances. So it's, you know, you guys are the glue that's holding everyone together. But also that means you're kind of in the middle of, you know, whatever tensions there are socially or political differences, you guys are caught up in the middle too, and you know, people sometimes make different decisions based on that. So, yeah, it's an ongoing conversation, but I do appreciate all the perspectives, and we do hear the feedback loud and clear. So,
Well, I have another question.
Go right ahead.
Well, I was reading the Governor Reynolds, she unveiled her bill.
this will be easier one for me. Thanks.
Yes, it came out last week, but in it, it said that the report suggests encouraging local governments and school districts to share more services to increase efficiency. But this doesn't specify what that might be. What are you expecting school districts to?
I was hoping you were going to bring up the teacher merit pay.
Well, that's next,
So,
yes, the teacher merit pay.
I'll start, I know the answer to that one, so I'll start answering that
Okay.
one. That's not an idea I've really heard from anyone, I mean, unless teachers are asking for it, which I haven't heard anything yet, I don't think that's gonna have a lot of legs. I think there's maybe one senator interested in that discussion, but I don't expect that to go very far. So we'll see what kind of proposal comes out, but it's not, again, I don't know where these ideas are coming from, but I wouldn't expect, too many of them to be more than a conversation. As far as the sharing services piece, you know, a lot of rural school districts, I think, are doing a lot of that already. I've been hearing that more on the county level, that, you know, county governments need to share services to be more efficient, especially talking about public health or other things that might be easy to regionalize. I think over a decade ago, there was a plan to maybe consolidate Iowa counties, and everyone hated it. You know, they want to maintain their local control, but when you look at the administration, you probably could do a lot of things to save money. If the goal was purely, you know, what's the most economical way to save these services, you probably could. And people are using the treasurer's office online, you know, so maybe you don't need them open 5 days a week. So I've been more familiar with that conversation at the county level. I did not read this particular article.
I know they said they have 45 suggestions, I'm just curious what they are.
Yeah, I read a summary of the report. I haven't read the report yet, but I can email it to you if you want to take a look. But yeah, I think that report was causing more trouble than they were intending to, and I haven't seen anything that stuck out, and it's like, I don't know, we'll see. So.
Can you speak to property tax relief, school?
So I think that was the other kind of piece of the conversation. So I'm not on Ways and Means Committee, and we have a new Ways and Committee Means chair in the House. The property tax discussion is front of mind. I think the challenge the legislature has is a lot of people say they want lower property taxes, but when you ask them what services they're willing to give up, it's a much shorter conversation. And whenever there's an EMS levy on the ballot, you know, they approve it, and I think Fairfield is likely to get their facility approved here next week. So it's again, I don't know if catch-22 is the right word, but you get mixed signals from the voting population. But so we kind of have to navigate that. And I think there was an idea floated out that what would it look like to restrict the property tax authority of the school district. A lot of things stalled the conversations, and I think lawmakers were pretty frustrated. So one problem we had was Department of Revenue was very untimely in giving us revenue projections based on any proposals. So that really stalled the process down. And then it didn't seem there was pretty wide gap between, I guess, House and Senate leadership on how they thought would go about it. But we've been told to say, or at least it's shaping up, that anything's on the table for property taxes, and they want to basically just kind of create a new system. They feel they've been putting Band-Aids on the system for too long, that it's time to just kind of start clean and see what that could look like. So I would be ready for anything, to be honest, and you know, just I think we got to make sure that we do our job to keep you guys informed in that conversation. But it could get interesting, and there's a lot of ideas floating out there. I'm pretty sure the rollback, I know that we're going to be getting rid of that. I think there's consensus on that piece, but, so, have you heard anything more?
Well, what I have heard, the property tax, and limiting school districts, or I don't know, other entities, but limiting school districts on the authority that they have is incredibly concerning to me and to my colleagues. I'll tell you, Jeff, the first thing, when we're together as a regional AEA group of superintendents, and they say, what's your biggest concern? What's your biggest priority? Without a doubt, it is aging facilities and the repair of facilities. That is number one. You just go across the board for my colleagues. It's like, I don't know how I'm going to take care of these buildings. I don't know how I'm going to, if there are limitations on let's say, on how you can use the saved dollars, or on if you can't bond for $2.70, if it's going to be some limited manner. I would want to know, okay, legislature, what's the plan? Because I can't imagine that anybody in the Capitol wants kids going to school in dilapidated, worn out buildings. So I would just say, what's the plan? Because that is top of mind for me and my colleagues, is how are we gonna pay for the necessary facilities that we need. That's one thing. The ability to go out one time every year for some kind of a referendum is really difficult to deal with. The economy of that and what that does, the way that it limits even local contractors, you know, and the economies locally, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing to have a lot of general contractors bidding on one project, but it's one time a year, and so none of that gets spread across the calendar. It makes it really, really difficult when we're limited to one time per year. So anyway, just emphasizing once again, top of mind for me and my colleagues is if they limit our ability to levy, I don't know how we're going to deal with the facilities that we have.
Well, I know at the very least, my expectation would be we backfill anything we take away from you guys and make it financially comfortable during any transition period. I can't imagine us doing anything too irresponsible, but I think there is need for, you know, a fresh reform and a fresh look at this. My encouragement to you would be to just make sure we're staying in touch with the Iowa Association of School Boards. This is where Senator Dickey would be really great to be here. He's more on the Ways and Means Committee, so he'll have more of a front row seat to this discussion. And maybe it takes 3 years to figure it out. It might. You know, I can't guarantee the legislature's going to have the competence to figure this out, because it really is a brass tacks political problem that affects every property owner and basically every service that relies on that tax revenue. So, but I know there is. We're hearing it. So again, I don't know exactly which way the conversation's going to go, but be ready to engage.
Yeah.
And be ready to just.
You know, yeah. I mean, you were hearing it. And I mean this respectfully.
Yeah.
You're hearing it from Farm Bureau or other entities like that. But you know, it's local people going to the polls and they should be deciding whether or not to fund construction or repairs of their public schools. That's a hallmark of the Republican Party is, you know, local. And anyway.
Well, we'd love to see as much direct democracy. It is, again, a great political science question, who shows up and votes in these things and which way do they vote. And so, yeah, anything we can do to encourage that. And that's actually another thing, again, I'm just saying these are ideas I've heard. I'm not saying it's going to happen or anything, but I know some people have suggested shifting the election cycle for local boards to coincide on the general election cycle with maybe a higher turnout. If there is something we can do with the referendum process I don't know, I know we already had that publicity notice, I believe, so. Anyway, these are ongoing discussions, and again, we need your input, and I mean, it's important we hear from everyone. So.
But as far as a bond referendum goes, instead of one time, you know, first Tuesday in November, have it 4 times per year. It doesn't have to be just at any point when a school would want to, but have four set days throughout the calendar.
I'll say this, based on what, you don't hesitate to reach out to your local farm bureau too, and make sure that they're lobbying on your behalf.
Right. I totally, 100%, I agree with you.
So we have those meetings coming up too, and.
So Derek?
Yes, I will bring that up.
I'd love to speak to them.
Well, just fire, I mean, everything you got, I mean, just whatever ammunition you gotta, so it is, they are an influential lobby group, and those opinions do matter, and we hear from everyone, so.
So back to property tax, I guess, you're looking at potentially getting rid of rollback, meaning you're assessed on the full value of your house.
I think generally speaking, that was kind of the idea, that they're gonna try to ratchet down those maximum levy rates, or again, if there's other services that we can take off the backs of county governments that maybe the state can handle more efficiently, there are a lot of really interesting things in code, that I think don't add up and don't really make sense, especially as it pertains to some of these local government responsibilities. So I would hope we can take a deeper dive and look as possible, but,
Those were just questions we were having earlier in the year when we were looking at possibly doing a bond referendum this next month. Obviously, we're not doing it, but yeah, next week. And we were having a conversation, this was this spring, we had discussions. How does this work? How is this going to work if something is passed? And the answer was, we don't know. If you want to go out for a bond in November, we don't know how it's going to work ultimately. So when you do try to make those decisions, we locally need to be able to kind of plan for 6 months in advance.
and that's why the conversation stalled out, because we weren't able to put something together where we knew for sure how it would work. So yeah, whatever the process is, I hope we can do it responsibly.
You just said like a 3-year process. Well, are you not going to have bonds happening for 3 years?
Well, I just meant, this is an issue, so we've addressed property taxes multiple times in 7 years I've been up here, and again, we're still hearing from it that it's something that we need to fix. So again, what exactly that looks like or how that's done, again, there's lots of ways you could theoretically do it. You know, if you can give away on the sales tax, that opens up a lot of possibilities, but you know, that might not be possible either, depending on, you know, the 100 reps and senators that are there, so. I just didn't want to put a firm timeline on the final legislation being done, and like I said, it's been as much of a roller coaster ride for me as I think it has. Like, you know, you look at the various things we've done already, but like I said, it is a problem we're hearing about, because again, when you couple it with inflation in the insurance rate market, that's been another thing. So for first-time home buyers who may be locked in at a certain mortgage price, and all of a sudden they're paying a few $100s more a month because of taxes and insurance, you know, that is putting stress, and especially in, you know, a nice suburban development where the assessed value did go up by 25 or 35%. So it's an interesting problem that we have before us. So I appreciate everyone's patience and willingness to work together on it.
I think all of that kind of ties back to us wanting to express the importance of maintaining local control. As a school board, we're elected by our community. We don't want to be handcuffed in our abilities to fund our district. So, to your point, you know, we want a stable property tax plan. We're able to levy, you know, don't have our levy actions be able, or have them cut in half. You know, we want to be able to levy what we need to stay afloat. And it all comes down to funding, right? The enrollment issue is a concern across the entire state. You know, the projection of DE 10 years down the road for the entire state doesn't look great, enrollment-wise, just all across the board. But I want to stress the importance, especially in your district, of just sticking up for rural public education. We have our own needs that are separate from the Des Moines public schools. I know it's a big leap, but I would love to see an idea thrown out there that we change the weighting of the per pupil funding. I think rural areas need a higher weighting for per pupil funding. I know when it was when it came out, the idea was, well, we want the same educational opportunity for your student no matter where they go. And it makes sense on that level, but in a school our size that's seeing decreased enrollment, we're not able to move into the 21st century education world the same as the Des Moines public education, because they have more enrollment. That means more money for them. So I really want to start seeing some representation for us as a rural school district. Like John mentioned, we have concerns about aging school buildings, maintaining attendance centers. We have one that is really partial to people in an even more rural area. That is costing us more to send our students there than all the rest of our school buildings. So to piggyback off John, we want to see some ideas on how to keep those aging school buildings open. is being looked after, because our teachers are very worried about that. Then at a federal level, I'd like you to start putting pressure on the federal DE to see that the IDEA and title funding stay in place. We saw some of that withheld recently across the whole country, and like Josh was saying, we make a budget, a year in advance, and those funds were already appropriated for people to be used in their special education funding. So if we see that being toyed with and withheld, it makes us concerned. We have a lot of staff that are paid from IDEA dollars. We have a lot of students that take advantage, or they need the title funding to get their education. So I want to see you, as our representative, put pressure on federal DE to don't toy with that and bolster special education funding instead of withhold it. And then just to wrap up, I know we've kind of hit this a lot, but with the vouchers, the ESA, you said in your opening statements that you look, as a state legislature, you like to look at other states and see what's happening around the country. And I think that there are plenty of case studies of universal school vouchers in other states that have just nickel and dimed state budgets. Arizona is a great example. The first year they said it was only going to cost X amount, and it was triple what it actually cost, and the next year was even more than that. So yeah, the regulation to match public education, but I just want to see more of a focus on public education funding, especially rural, where we don't have a ton of private charter schools. I don't want to see expansion of homeschooling to where families can homeschool other people's children and be able to use public dollars for that. I think it could just spiral out of control. And so I just want to see us kind of rein back in the idea of supporting public education and stick up for the rural entities out here that aren't faring as well as the metropolitan areas in our state.
And then to piggyback on yours, it's transportation. We have 16 bus routes. The rural schools, Des Moines doesn't have a bus system. The cities don't have that. That's a big cost to rural education, transportation.
So Jeff, with the transportation, wasn't there a separate funding mechanism for rural schools for transportation? Did that go anywhere last session?
Yeah, that's been in effect since 2019, and I think that is one of the things the House Caucus does, try to pump a little more money into for the geographically bigger districts. Again, it's not, I think it maybe amounts to $5 per pupil or something. I mean, it's not the biggest amount of money in the world, but it is a mechanism to help direct and recognize there are additional costs incurred there.
I don't think that's something our district's been able to take advantage of.
We haven't, because you have to be above, we have been at or just below the average across the state, and that's how you access those funds.
Is that just square mileage, or how do they measure that?
Cost per pupil of transporting the children.
So if that could be increased at all, that would be another help.
I would hate to incentivize you guys to increase costs just to take advantage of the funding program.
Fine.
Nobody would do that. So yeah, to your point, certainly that's great feedback. I think, as a rural representative, I certainly would like to do anything I can to, help make sure you guys are getting what you need. As far as the federal Department of Education, I would, I wasn't super familiar with what you were describing with those funds, so feel free to email me if there's something you think needs some attention. On the ESA piece, I do just want to clarify. So the private schools, they are regulated by third-party accreditors that are underneath the Department of Education, essentially. So there is still a regulation component where these schools do have to provide, for their accreditation, their re-accreditation. So it's not like a total Wild West scenario, but yeah, I think it make sure there's oversight that a private school is not fraudulently enrolling pupils to take advantage of the program. Certainly that needs to take place. I can't speak to Arizona necessarily. I think part of the problem is the program has been somewhat popular. So in terms of the total enrollees and people who are wanting to take advantage of the funding, I think it did come in a little bit over the expectation of what we were thinking. So again, we can, ask ourselves kind of why that is. The homeschool dynamic is incredibly interesting because, I've talked to a few families that have moved to our area, and almost all of them, a noticeable number of them are electing to homeschool. So I don't know exactly what, I have my theories on why that trend might be taking place, but that has kind of been feedback we have been getting that, families are wanting to explore these opportunities and connect with each other, whether they would ever be eligible for, an education savings account to cover some of those expenses. I think the homeschoolers themselves are split on that question. I think there probably are some kind of getting into it who would love an additional, few $1,000s or $8,000 if you want to give them the full amount. But I think there's other homeschoolers who've been around for a little while that are very reluctant and have no interest in that proposal whatsoever. So I don't know if there's a consensus on that, but it is a discussion that's happening. But again, these are kind of trends. We just kind of sit back and see, hey, this is the way that people are going. How can we best support them? What are people asking of us? Anyway, the feedback's very important, and again, it's an ongoing conversation. So I'm sure I'll see somebody up at the Capitol around February when these decisions are made, and we can have these same conversations then.
And to bounce back, popularity of ESAs, we saw statistics that show people were already attending private schools that were taking advantage of these, or had family members, not quite in the school yet, under the age of 5. And then we saw an alarming number of those private institutions raise their tuition as soon as they were able to accept ESAs. That should have been decided ahead of time that couldn't take place because we just negated, the savings to that family. That truly was what they were after. And we just saw public dollars go that way to not really benefit those students either.
So I appreciate you raising the red flag on that. That was something I was keenly interested in as well. And I think you're right, it does raise a flag on the smell test. The kind of explanation they gave was with the general supply and demand issue, that if they have a lot more students seeking their services than they can actually accommodate, then there has to be some pricing mechanism to accommodate that, or at least allow them to look at what would it take to, contribute or build out their facilities or whatever they need. So it's, again, I was very skeptical of that as well, and I think that is something to keep an eye on, because if they are just raising the rate by that amount, then again, we're just effectively subsidizing the private school and not necessarily providing that safety valve release is the way, I think the program is initially envisioned and, again, likely kind of required, given some of the circumstances we saw in various school districts in the 21, school year and thereabouts. So, again, I do consider it a conversation in progress, especially for, what else might be able to exploit a loophole to be a private accredited. Anyway, I don't know if I can just add there.
And there used to be a requirement of income level too, that you had to be below in order to take advantage of the ESA. Now that's been removed, right? So it's
It was a phase-in.
Everybody.
Well, again, it just comes from this idea that, every student, theoretically, the state has an obligation to provide for them to the greatest extent of free and appropriate public education. And then if there are problems in the public school, does that extend to, if the per pupil funding is there, that was the idea, can we just staple the check to the kid's back, and just, make sure it's spent on school supplies? So, at least there is some parameters on, hey, only these set of expenses are applicable to the ESA, and that's supposed to be tracked through the system that administers it. So, but yeah, theoretically, the per pupil support that the state provides is there for everyone, and, we didn't feel the need to discriminate on income necessarily. So, anyway, it's working out the way it's working out. Again, I just kind of keep an eye on the local institutions. So, it's just the Maharishi in Fairfield, and they have a Singing Cedars, which is about like a K through 5 or something, maybe 40 students, and then Mount Pleasant Christian, who they were pretty reluctant to go along and get accredited, from what I understood, and then finally they had enough parents pushing for it. But they didn't dive right in, and because again, I think some people are a little hesitant. Will this create a mechanism, or more realistically, if I'm depending on the government for this funding, what could come on down the road? Am I compromising my independence by somehow getting entwined with this financial relationship with the state? I will say this too, there was a hiccup with Singing Cedars in Fairfield their accreditor made a mistake, and basically they were going to get kicked off the accreditation list, even though they had previously been accreditation in progress. So, like I said, it amounted to maybe $250,000 for the school district, like I said, over 40 people or so. And thankfully, they were able to get that worked out. But they were operating under the impression that this funding that they thought the state was going to provide for them was not going to be there. And so, again, the school was kind of in a crisis for a period of a few weeks because they had relied on the state government when maybe we got to think carefully about that. So, anyway, so like I said, I think we're we're in year 3 now, right? So, I can't predict what the future holds, but just keep giving us this feedback and keep an eye on things. Let us know what you're seeing and hearing.
This is a COVID thing, we just get rid of it. So, everyone will be done with COVID.
That would require there's a lot of things I could say on that. I think there's a lot of outstanding questions that have not been properly adjudicated post-COVID. So if we were able to get to the bottom of it, then yeah, theoretically, I would love to get to that point, right? Like that, people have what they need and this is not a necessary thing. But again, I think the education system is evolving in a way where, these genies are out of the bottle, the cat's out of the bag, and and again, we're entering a period now where probably now or in the very near future, there'll be AI products that, can give a child a personalized curriculum and react in real time to whatever the kid is interested in. And the state's been deploying an AI literacy tool, I think called the Mira. And again, it gives me the creeps when I first heard about it, but then you hear the feedback and it's like, oh, people are really appreciating this because it can be accessed 24/7. It's pretty impressive technology. My concern is from a pedagogical standpoint is this idea of empathy. You want some sort of empathetic relationship between the teacher and the student that theoretically leads to success. And can a student empathize with a machine? That's a very 21st century question that we're exploring here. So,
Doesn't that contradict less technology?
That's what
I'm very, very cautious. So I think we're just starting that conversation, and there is a theory that hey, technology will solve everything, especially if we need people. We have teacher shortage of educators. And again, during COVID, it was a necessity, right? We had the pandemic, and there's an emergency, so we'll do the best we can with the tools we have. But again, I'm most concerned about, actually the term is cognitive diminishment. The more you rely on a machine or a tool, you actually lose the capacity. So yeah, exporting our cognitive functions, which is saying, hey, this AI will do my reading comprehension and my essay writing for me. I think that's a very dangerous precedent, which again will seem really, really cool at first until you need to think independently and the machine, either turned against you in some Terminator type scenario or whatever can't be relied upon. Or the price of electricity just gone up too much. We got to start rationing kilowatt hours because the data center sucked it all up, which is also a very real concern. When you look at you guys are Mount Pleasant you're a Mount Pleasant municipal utility.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So you guys are getting a good deal here.
So we did our SIAC committee last year. The year before, we had some strong conversations about technology in the classroom and how much screen time. And Dr. Butler, our director of curriculum, did do a day in the life of every student to go understand how much we're using. So we are cognitive of that and we want to make sure that they're still getting those people interactions and that we don't rely on technology for everything. But
we also don't want to go back to pen and paper for everything. That's my opinion.
Why
When
not?
you said that.
Why not?
I mean, we live in a technological world. I don't feel that isolating children and then making them write everything pen and paper with no computer in the educational space is realistic once you get out of the educational space.
So again, I think the goal of the education, we really have to be looking at basically how kids can problem solve, how they can do things on their own, how they can think. And so I'll take the cursive handwriting example. There is a lot of literature that supports the idea of writing and handwriting and script, supports forming the neurological connection and having a book in your hand and turning the page is actually forming neurological connections that would not be formed if it's just on the computer. And then the big thing with the computer, so
I think you can do both. I should say that. I'm not saying 100% one-on-one all day long with electronics. but I'm also not saying only pen and paper with no electronics.
Well,
There
so-
needs to be a combination.
Well, so
in my opinion.
from, I guess and again, this is an ongoing conversation, so we'll be probably talking about the same thing 10 years from now. But so, you know, from the state of Iowa perspective, you know, I want to make sure whatever policies we have are supported by the very best evidence available, that we're making students as proficient as possible to handle whatever they need to handle in life. And so there has been, and again, I'm going to say it's controversial. I'd say the data is maybe not clear, because there is a lot of, you know, in my opinion, industry fluff that will support, you know, a certain thing. But there have been some meta-analysis conducted where kids are just a lot less proficient using the technology. And when you look at the proficiency of the students this generation versus the proficiency of students a generation ago or 2 generations ago, we're not getting where we need to be, and in some instances it's falling backwards depending on certain measurements. So we have to look at what's changed on that. And when you look at the way the technology is used in the classroom, one, this theory of multitasking is not very supportive, and what we've seen is that as soon as a kid is on a device, they start getting distracted. And so we have this phenomenon during COVID where the student checks in remotely, and then immediately they're signed into some other app or game, and they've done the bare minimum to be present, and then immediately they're doing something else, listening to music, whatever it is. And we've seen this with the cell phones too, that even there was some evidence to support it, even if the cell phone was in the point of view of adults even, that even just having it in your you know, awareness could contribute to you know, a delayed attention span or distraction. And then again, really, I think this empathy point is huge, that, you know, students need in-person connection and a good relationship between a teacher and an educator, that, you know, the system, the education system, the teacher can properly empathize with whatever that student needs. And I suspect there may be a gap there with some of the technological tools. And then lastly is the transfer problem, that if you have, you know, when a student performs something on a device, can they perform that same thing without a device? And this is the great calculator question, right? Like, do students need to be learning arithmetic if they'll have a calculator present with them the whole time? Arguably, no. You know, arguably it's a skill that's no longer needed because a tool can do it for them. But is that in the best interest of the student's long-term, you know, self-sufficiency as a lifelong learner? And are we going to stop teaching these things just because the tools available to do it better? And so I think these are very real conversations, and whether learning on a tablet or a computer, does that actually transfer to another setting? And I think the evidence is saying that's very questionable. So I'm glad we can have that conversation. I don't want to push back too hard, because obviously it's a give and take.
I'm going to put this part in there too. So the education, or the technology piece, I think you can look at it like, I'm going to pick some people out here based on age. If we ask,
Hey, be
really,
careful.
Melinda and Mike,
Oh,
Be careful.
you're in trouble now.
about computer type stuff, I assume you guys don't know the best of all of the computers. Now, if I go ask my 10-year-old how to write something on a piece of paper, his handwriting is terrible. It's completely awful. Doesn't know how to do it. I feel like, I don't know your age, but I'm gonna go with you, me, you guys. We kind of grew up in the sweet spot where we both had to write, and technology was coming up where we had to learn how to work with computers and go into computers. If I ask Jaden how to work or go into a computer, he doesn't know. He knows how to push the apps, and his handwriting is terrible. If I ask Melinda how to write something, she has beautiful cursive handwriting, but I ask her to do something on a computer, go into the settings and change something, she doesn't know. You have to have both, in my opinion. So for the state to come down and say, we're only going handwriting, pencil and paper, I think that's doing a disservice. For the state to also go on the flip side and say, we're going one-on-one, everything's electronic, I think that's a disservice. There has to be both coming together. And even if the state does come back to us and say, nope, we're going handwriting, pen and paper and everything, that flies in the face of everything. How many millions of dollars are being spent right now on fiber being run just through Mount Pleasant, infrastructure of that, and then all we already have the one-on-one stuff, but there's so much technology coming in. You just said the AI. There's technology already. You're gonna have to grow up with technology. You learn it in schools for learning, learn some in school, but also learn the cursive and the handwriting.
And I also like to say, like, this philosophical discussion is great, but when we're seeing schools closed because they don't have enough funding, that should be the discussion, right? I want to see more back to basics of how you keep education rolling. Now, to your guys' credit, you know, when the PE gets together and they talk about curriculum, like you started your opening presentation, we've seen great strides in the letters program and what that literacy is doing with our students in reading. So, you know, I understand how these types of questions fuel outcomes like those curriculum decisions, and then we see good outcomes from student performance. However, it's also a burden on our teachers. You know, these continual demands of changing curriculum, adding PE, you know, this letters requirement was hard to fit into their schedule. But in the moment, in the trenches, they've got a student that is just unruly and a distraction for everybody. I just think there are some core principles of education that we need to get back to and focus on as a state to figure out how we keep enrollment within the state, how we fund schools so they don't close, how we keep over half of our school districts off the budget guarantee. You know, I want to just see us kind of come back to basics and table some of these philosophical questions for later.
So again, I appreciate where you're coming from, but again, I think the exact opposite is what needs to happen. So again, on the technology discussion, and I appreciate your points. I might have done a poor job introducing the subject. I think we're probably closer together than we might realize. Just on the technology piece, if you're telling me that school districts have invested lots of money in one-to-one device policies over the last 15 years, and that is not leading to increased proficiency, and it's actually causing social and emotional harm, and it's not documented in the anxious generation, that's not going to be, I can't fund that. I can't in good conscience fund a system that's not going to be providing for the best outcome for students. So we really have to explore these policy pieces as deeply as possible, as often as possible, just to make sure that we're doing the very best we can at asking these questions. And it's not philosophical. So the actual thing is we have parents come to us and say, hey, I have a student with an IEP, I wanted a combination of a technology-free environment because I think that's better for my student, and the school district said we can't accommodate that. So that becomes a problem, and if you tie it into the enrollment piece, if a parent wants a technology-free environment for whatever reason, for their kid's health or for whatever other reason, and if the school district can't provide that, then that's going to be a loss in enrollment. So I don't think we'd ever see a scenario where the state would have such a blanket-wide approach. I think more the conversation would be is, you know, what is the expectation on a school district if a parent does request such a thing, or, you know, do we need to revisit the technology standards that are currently in the Department of Education to make sure that they're actually up to date with what is known and not known about this? I think a lot of this, even with the ad, like there's a lot of impressive sales presentations and sales pitches. Oh, we want the latest and greatest next best thing. But I mean, the basics that you're describing is going to be the pedagogy, the reading, the writing, the arithmetic, the basic proficiencies that are being delivered in the school setting. So I think that's really the main question that we have to be back on. And I think, again, the more we can, again, just make sure that the school districts and the policymakers at the state or national level are doing the best they can on all these questions, I think the better the system's going to work for everyone. And again, I think there are a lot of these public-private partnerships coming online where students will have lots of opportunities and parents will have lots of opportunities for satisfaction. And hopefully we get the economy with inflation under control where we can, you know, give 4% or more SSA and make sure our teachers are very well compensated and that paraeducators are making closer to $25 an hour or whatever it needs to be to make sure that the skills that are needed to be present in the classroom are there. We haven't even touched on teacher licensure yet, which I think is still a perennial issue.
Well,
sorry to go overboard on there, but I appreciate the passion. I just think there is a lot here that we really need to explore and get to the bottom of. So
I do have we end with this, but I do have a teacher licensure specific that I want to make sure I ask you. I just wanted to mention though, the kid that you said with the IEP, I will just tell you, if that kid's attending a private school, we're the ones servicing his IEP. We're doing the minutes as SDI.
Okay.
Because the private isn't, you know.
That's an important distinction. I appreciate you noticing.
So anyway, specific on teacher licensure. I have spoken to the Board of Educational Examiners, and they said, you have to bring it up with your legislator, because it's a code issue. We had a late resignation last year in elementary art, and I thought, both Dr. Butler and I thought, oh, well, that's not a big deal. That would be an easy one, because we had an elementary, we had a candidate for one of the elementary jobs who loved to do art. And I thought, well, that would be easy. That person could teach art at the elementary. When we found out that she couldn't do that without an art endorsement. However, that same person can teach art in their own elementary classroom, can teach music in their own elementary classroom, can teach PE in their own elementary classroom, but they can't teach any of those specials to another group of kids. So you can teach your own 3rd grade kids art, but you can't teach another group of 3rd grade kids.
You're not able to get any sort of provisional licensure? There's no...
You can get a provisional licensure, yes, that would last for a year.
Okay.
But it just didn't make any sense to me that, okay, I can teach art to my own kids, my own 3rd grade kids, but I can't teach art to the 3rd grade kids across the hall. It didn't make any sense.
Did they tell you the code section needs to be changed, or?
No.
You don't have that email?
No.
Okay. I'd be very happy to follow up with that. The Board of Education Examiners has also been kind of a sore spot, where again, it's taking a long time to adjudicate complaints. There's a lot of people unhappy with that for various reasons, but if it's a legislative fix, I would love to get that fixed.
I'll see if I can find what section in the code that is.
Yeah, I can follow up or just connect us all on email or whatever it takes. I hope we can get some of those issues straightened out. I know the Regents institutions are continuing their work to get some accreditation programs in place, and but I want to just make sure we're making it easy as possible for teachers to get trained.
Well, I've been pleased with the efforts on trying to, on teacher licensure.
Some achievements would be a little bit better, but efforts, Anyway, I feel like we have a long way to go on that still. How are you guys doing on your personnel? Are you guys hiring, or were you guys looking at?
We were able to hire all of our positions, yeah, and I know that's hasn't been the case. Well, it hasn't been the case for us in years past, and it's not the case for some of our neighboring school districts and regional school districts.
Some of the districts were poaching from other districts where it got kind of ugly, so there's a high bounty of personnel, so. Anything else? I think we've had a good conversation.
Yes,
Hopefully,
yeah.
This is my work.
Start date.
Oh, we didn't get that fixed either.
No.
I don't buy into that tourism stuff, so I think I'm on the same side of you guys with that. And again, there are some things that just maybe don't make quite sense, so. This was my first run back, so I'm glad I'm getting warmed up to get back to session. Please stay in touch.
Well, I think, Jeff, too, I would like to say, educators have taken a beating through the past few years. I think they feel almost like they've been knocked down. They need to be picked up. You have the ability as a legislator, in the legislature of the state of Iowa, to stand up for education in the state of Iowa and for the teachers in the state of Iowa. And I would like to see you do that. And instead of making comments about teachers made comments on this and so on, that's a small percentage of teachers are doing the questionable things.
So
there's a heck of a lot of good teachers out there that are doing great things every day for our kids, our grandkids, and we need to make note of that.
So that's why it's so tragic when something happens. It sucks up all the oxygen in that. So again, it's.
But I think you have a role as a legislator to set the tempo. You can do that as chairman of the education committee. You can.
I'm not chairman.
Well, not chair, but on the education committee, you can do that. You can do that. And I would really like to see the legislature support our teachers. And not only the financial aspect of it, but in other aspects.
So I agree 100%, and that's why I think that teacher pay piece was really important to bring online. And we need to, again, make sure that pay increase is also there for better teachers who've been there for a long time. I think that's probably a worthy appropriation. I think the best thing we can do is also just making sure those behavioral incidents in the classrooms are properly adjudicated, that all the policies are supporting the educators in that environment. That has been the main feedback I've been getting directly. But no, I do appreciate the sentiment, and I'm very thankful for all the people that make this school district go, especially all the board members for putting in the work. I know you guys had a lot of long meetings lately. And
Put in a ton of work.
hopefully, I'm sure you'll still be finding things to do in the years ahead too. I know that. Appreciate all your many years of service as well, superintendent.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right, appreciate you guys for hanging on with me.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, I'm going to adjourn this meeting at an early hour of 7:47.